everyone. Welcome to day 17 of Jesse Tree, God's Big Advent Story. Today we're going to hear about the fall of Jerusalem, which is kind of a sad story. But like all good things, there is a good side to it. So before we get started, we're going to calm our heads and our hearts and our hands. And we're going to take a big, deep breath in and let it out slowly. So the fall of Jerusalem, which is God's holy city, takes place in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verses 11 through 21. So let's hear about how the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 11 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the Lord his God's eyes, and didn't submit before the prophet Jeremiah, who spoke for the Lord. Moreover, he rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar. He rebelled against his pledge, I'm going to try that again. Moreover, he rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, despite the solemn pledge Nebuchadnezzar had forced him to swear in God's name. He became stubborn and refused to turn back to the Lord Israel's God. All the leaders and the priests and the people who grew increasingly unfaithful, following the detestable practices of the nations. They polluted the Lord's temple, and God had dedicated in Jerusalem. Time and time again, the Lord, the God of their ancestors, sent word to them through his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and his dwelling. But they made fun of God's messengers, treating God's words with contempt and ridiculing God's prophets to such an extent that there was no hope of warding off the Lord's rising anger against God's people. So God brought the Babylonian king against them. The king killed their young men with their sword in their temple sanctuary. They showed no pity for young men or women, for the old or for the feeble. God handed all of them over to them. Then the king hauled everything off to Babylon, every item from God's temple, both large and small, including the treasures from the Lord's temple, and those of the king and all of his officials. Next, the Babylonians burned God's temple down, demolished the walls to Jerusalem, and set fire to all its palaces, destroying everything of value. Finally, he exiled to Babylon anyone who survived, so that they could be his slaves and the slaves for his children until Persia came to power. This is how the Lord's word spoken by Jeremiah was carried out. The land finally enjoyed its Sabbath rest. For as long as it lay empty, it rested, until 70 years were completed. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So this story is a lot about disobeying. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times I don't like to do what I'm told. And we all disobey. You disobey your parents. We disobey God. And I wonder how God's people felt when they disobeyed. How does it feel when you disobey what your parents ask of you? It doesn't feel good, does it? And sometimes we disobey because it's hard to realize what our parents are telling us is really there to protect us. And that is what God was doing. God was trying to send messengers through Jeremiah, trying to tell people, stop doing what you're doing. What you're doing is wrong. And they just would not listen. So I wonder what this story tells us about God. The Israelites were removed from Jerusalem. They were taken away to Babylon, and they stayed there for 70 years, which is a long time. But they do get to come back. And I think that even though sometimes we do things that we may not want to do or we shouldn't do, we disobey and we're disrespectful and we don't do the things that we should do, that God still loves us, that our parents still love us, that those in our lives who we hurt still love us even when we do things we shouldn't. And that is really what Christmas is all about. A lot of times this time of year we focus on doing good things for maybe our elf on the shelf or so that Santa brings us toys, but we should be doing good things all the time because Christmas really is about Jesus who came and told us how to live better lives and how to be good people. So today's sticker is this guy. It's the little, it's the destruction of the temple, so you can see that it's broken, and it's like one of the pillars of the temple is broken, to remind us that sometimes that our actions have consequences, and that when we do bad things, we need to apologize and say, I'm sorry, but that doesn't change how people feel about us, that people still love us, God still loves us, even when we don't do what we should. I'm going to put this guy up here. The tree's getting pretty full already. So as you close today in prayer, I want you to think about a time that you disobeyed and maybe ask for forgiveness from the person that you might have hurt, or from, if you disobeyed God, to ask for forgiveness, but to give thanks that Jesus has forgiven us for all that we do, that we are forgiven. And that is what we experience this Christmas and this time together. So with that, I hope to see you again tomorrow on Friday, and take care, folks. We'll see you soon.